All right, everybody. Sorry for the late start. This is beyond formations. Honestly, I bet we have this whole formation thing's wrong. We're talking about formations like the way it was done 40 years ago, at least in the United States. And what we're doing is we're talking about formations in the counterattack or build-up phase, like what they look like out the back. And we're really not talking about formations like what they're supposed to develop into, supposed to build out of, right? Depending on whether or not we're attacking deep or attacking high possession. High possession meaning further up the field, right? So like where you're supposed to end up in the attacking third does not even remotely resemble a 4-2-3-1, right? But at least in the United States, we have a more fluid counterattacking style. So the 4-2-3-1 kind of maintains itself going forward. But if you're rigidly positional and you're counterattacking, there's a next phase of play, right? There's where the ball pauses and stops in transition and the formation kind of bends. There's the high-shin, there's a recovery, there's a count, whatever it is. At that point, in the next phase of play, beyond build-up and counterattacking, the formation is nonsense, right? It's not a 4-2-3-1, right? So formations are like an illusion. We need to rethink both space, position, or we need to rethink three things: space, position, and structure, right? And the formations are not what we think they are, period. End of story, right? Formations describe starting points and not in-game structure. And average positions and passing maps, passing network maps, are what's actually going to reveal functional shape, right? And real shape, functional shape is informed by movement, tactics, roles, and positions. And what at this point coaches and analysts have to do is measure what the real shape is, not just name or label formation is. So if we start with the paradigm of fluid play, like what we're doing while we're counterattacking, what we're doing in certain areas of the field, right? We're within the structure. In the structure, there's certain players that are responsible for the ball. It's between 4 or 5. The higher up the field you may have 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 players responsible for the ball. The players that are responsible for the ball are in much more fluid motion, right? And so the spatial architecture around them, the other 5 or 4 players that are not responsible for the ball, that's the sort of spatial architecture. How deep, how wide you are, what your role is. Are you ready to counter press? Are you gonna pin wide? Are you gonna hold the middle? The players who are off the ball give us the spatial architecture. But the players on the ball, right, are allowed to interchange. And they may run things like automations, right? They are much, much more fluid. They don't just give structure, but they give fluidity to play. And so there is an understanding of style of play with respect to those 4 players or 5 players or even 6 players, right? So, Argentina plays 6 players control on the ball with 1 dropping in, a false 9, right? A lot of teams, especially deeper in, play three players responsible for the ball in a line of control with a pivot and the shadow striker roaming underneath, right? Other teams, like Barcelona in particular, only play with 2 diamonds that are linked with the 9 and the center back, right? But within the 2 diamonds, they become much more flexible. So if you think about those 4 really reflect almost the functional architecture of futsal, right? Because futsal is a matter of attacking with 4 players, right? So if those 4 are in a box, 3-2-2-3, we're now futsal, that box, 2-2 box now, the Chazar 2-2 box, is influencing how the midfield plays in outdoor, right? The Boca System, right? Where it's a 4-0, but the two middle players are stacked. And it's not like a line of four. The two middle players are stacked. And now the question is how do you break down a low block zone, right? By inserting the Boca double fixo with options out wide left, and wide right. And the English call it a bounce pass, right? The ball swings. So there's one guy here blocking, one guy down here, and then the ball swinging between the two, bounce passing the two. And that provokes the press, it draws the zone out, right? And then you have the sort of traditional functional play, Escandinha, which is the ladder, right? So the half-turn blind pass up and down the ladder, right? Tabela, and importantly, the third man principle, right? So now some systems have dedicated third men, right? And third men play the same position as, say, a striker or false 9 or 10, and he's just sitting underneath and then moves, right? So when the 9 or the 10 pass the ball, the third man makes the run. The third man sitting underneath makes the run through, right? Or additionally, right? You could have players that overload, right? Players that start in the 4-man structure of controlling the ball, right? The fluid structure, and then the balls move wide to a spatial player, right? To a player holding width, and then overloads down the middle, right? So there's a lot of spatial architecture and fluid play that's based on not a formation. It's based on who's responsible for the ball and who's not responsible for the ball, right? And what kind of space are they holding and what kind of formation they're holding. So formations are like frozen space. They're sort of meta or macro shapes, right? And they reflect principles. So if, for instance, Chelsea does a wheel, 2 players middle and then 4 and 4, right? 2 central players an axis, everyone else rotates around, right? Creating wide arcs and release angles. And they're very, very far away and very spread out, right? And they do have to model the field, right? Sort of like so that they don't get too spread out or too far away, and they don't drift into press traps. But you only got 2 guys in the middle who control the tempo and not, that's how the space is created, right? By opening up that middle with the 2 guys central. You know, some teams attack out of a block, right? So they attack from deep, and when they recover the ball, they attack very quickly, right? So France will have 2 lines of 5 through the midfield, and they're looking to play through and switch early, right? As part of their guide, higher up the field than many teams build, right? But they go narrow, and there's no midfield to speak of, right? It's 5 at the back, 5 in the front, right? For instance, Barca's linked diamonds we talked to, right? Jugamos en cuadrados. We play in 4s, right? So there's 2 4s we're linked, diamonds and squares. It creates a lot of triangles and automated support. In the geometric map, within the 4, they're even more fluid, right? They exchange more, they have more automations. I think we already mentioned it, but Argentina is really a 1-2-1 rest, 6 forwards with 1 forward dropping, all right? And right? Linking the midfield and the attack. 2 holding midfielders and a 6-man block behind and sort of in front and wide, right? Across the top. And as they funnel forward, they'll start dropping players in. So as the formation funnels, maybe there isn't space for 6 across the top. So as they go in forward, they're dropping players in between the lines, right? Or Manchester City plays an inverted pyramid, 2-3-5, or 2-4-4, right? And you can measure it. You use this use the map sequence, the passing map sequence, average positions, and you'll measure what the actual formation, what the goal of the coach is. So I want to think Unai Emery, right? Plays forward the back with 2 split triangles, sort of like that Barca idea. And then another way to open up space, right, or spatial relationships is Bielsa, right, who pairs, almost shrinks, rather than have 10 positions, he has 5 positions on the field that are doubled up, right? So he's shrunk by putting a shadow pair together. And then that's what makes the third man run. So, you know, one player passes and his shadow makes the run, all right? And those automations are now set, right, between 2s. So Bielsa plays in 2s, 5 groups of 2, as opposed to a group of 4, or 2 groups of 3, group of 3, right, and 5 groups of 2s, right? France plays in 2 lines of 5, right? Argentina plays a diamond with 6, and then the further up the field they're dropping in between the lines. Derby plays a 2-7-2 with no midfield. So the goalkeeper comes out and is part of the line of control on the ball. And so all these concepts, right? The funneling concept, right? That dictates formation. Positional play, right? Positional play, more along the lines of those 4, the players who are controlling the ball. If they're up against the zone defense, they're going to take positions against the zone defense, right? They have players drop in position. A false 9 drop in and take a position. 10 drop in and take a position against the zone defense. They're not going to rotate against the zone defense, right? Relate, those are the automations. It's Tabela, Conducción, Escandinha, right? And so, you know, and then who's interchanging, right? So Lewandowski had functional interchangers, people who could drop in and play certain, they would switch, right? Depending on what they were good at doing, where the field they were good at doing it, right? They would switch and rotate. So if you needed someone to help you build up, someone from the midfield would drop into the defensive line and help with the build-up. We already talked about it, but you know, one organizational principle is the 8-2-2-3 box, the WM, right? And who inverts along the 3, right? Normally you have 4 or 5 in the defensive line. So what are you gonna guys? 3, are they gonna go in the middle? They're gonna go up, whatever, right? So, you know, those are organizing principles, right? How do they invert? Are they inverting? Are they pushing up? What are they, right? Those are the outside backs in terms of outside backs, right? And then, you know, if you're in a 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, right? That dictates how you're building up, right? Might dictate how you're counterattacking and counterpressing. But maybe, and certainly, right, when you're expected to be in a defensive shape, it's more traditional. But, you know, certainly through the midfield and into the attacking portion, the formations don't bear any resemblance to what you're doing in modern football, to the 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 concept, right? And if you're pressing, right, it could be a whole different other shape than defending, counterattacking, and attacking, right? Well, the pressing models, right, that when you try and regain position high, you're very different, right? The low block defensive models will be very different. It doesn't relate to our concept of formations at all, right? Almost the point of not being relevant. I think Arteta said the other day, we use 6 different formations in tons of situations in the game, right? All right. So the coaching and analysis takeaways, right? You gotta teach stations and third man run principles, as well as the fluid combinations within those four, whoever's controlling the ball. If it's 3-1-1, 5-0, 4-0, however you're doing it, triangles with three, groups of three, or groups of two. You gotta teach the automations, the fluid play that's relevant to that system, what the player's gonna see. And you've almost got to measure in real time the interactions, patterns, and space, right, to come up with what you're doing. And where you are in the field, like the space you're taking up, irrespective of your formation, the position you're taking up, and your role dictate in the modern game what you're supposed to be doing, right? And that's what phase what shape do you play in transition? What shape do you play when you're ahead? What shape do you play when you're behind? What shape do you play in rest defense, right? What shape do you play when you're pressing? There's a lot of combinations, right? A lot of factors that can affect what the real formation is supposed to be. So, for this, I would encourage people to read David Sumpter, Soccermatics, and what he did at the Barca Innovation Hub. Paco, Cirillo, Bielsa, De Zerbi, those are all distinct kind of approaches, right? To what the real formations are, right? And what the ideas are behind those formations.